Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into ancient mythology. Not for wisdom, not for war strategy, but for something much sleepier. You're on a quiet, dusty battlefield. It's already over. The dust has settled. Broken spears lie half buried in the earth. And here comes Ares, god of war swaggering in way too late, swinging a sword like he's posing for a marble statue, and yelling, "Let's do this!" to a field full of silence and regret. You probably won't survive this board game night either. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're watching. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a burnt plain that once echoed with the screams of battle. Now, just wind brushing through shattered shields and trampled banners. The war is over, which means Ares is arriving. He's late again, but it doesn't stop him from showing up at full volume, armor clanking like a dropped kitchen drawer, red cape billowing like it thinks it's more important than the rest of the gods combined. This is typical. Ares never really understands timing. He doesn't bring strategy. He doesn't coordinate with Athena. He doesn't even pretend to read the room. His whole vibe is show up, make it loud, swing until everyone stops moving. And unlike most gods, Ares doesn't come with nuance. Zeus has thunder and judgment. Poseidon brings storms and earthquakes and the occasional fatherly sulk. Athena is logic, reason, and death by 1,000 well-placed ideas. But Ares is the god you call when you want everything broken, loudly and immediately, with zero follow-up questions. Historians still argue whether Ares was ever meant to be taken seriously by the Greeks. Some say he was a warning and embodiment of unrestrained aggression. Others think he was a holdover from Thracian cults where war was respected in a far more guttural, less philosophical way. You pause at a small hill, where a broken helmet lies half buried in the dust. Ares picks it up like it's a trophy, then tosses it aside when it doesn't scream. He's always looking for the next thing to punch. See, unlike Athena, who plans a siege 3 months in advance and wins with 3 sentences and a metaphor, Ares needs chaos. He feeds off the confusion. He likes battle not for honor, not even for conquest, but because it's noisy and he gets to hit people and nobody tells him to use his inside voice. There's a funny fringe theory, probably not true, but cute, that Ares once tried to invent war sports. Not formal athletics like the Olympics. No, more like full contact discussion where everyone loses teeth and nobody keeps score. Ancient pottery shards suggest some depictions of warriors engaging in game-like combat with oversized dice, but it's more likely metaphor than Monopoly. Still, you can imagine Ares watching a game of hoplite dice and flipping the table mid-turn because someone rolled a 2. He's the god of overkill, and nobody invites him twice. You trail behind him now as he storms into the next village to boast about how bravely he would have fought if the war hadn't inconveniently ended. Villagers politely nod while clutching their broomsticks. Even mortal farmers know better than to say, "But you didn't really do anything, right?" Because Ares doesn't like criticism. He hears constructive feedback and assumes it's a threat. And when someone does stand up to him, like, say, a clever Spartan woman whose family just rebuilt their home after one of Ares's tantrums, he freezes. That's the secret. For all his rage, Ares has paper-thin confidence. He's not respected among the Olympians. He doesn't get invited to war councils. Even his dad, Zeus, thinks he's a bit much. Hera defends him out of maternal obligation, but even she occasionally sighs when he storms in yelling about vengeance and how nobody understands the poetry of battle anymore. And oh, the poetry. You sit beside him as he tries to compose a war chant. It starts promisingly with drums and thunder and ends with him yelling "skulls" 5 times into the void. No structure, no point, just vibes. There's an old amphora stored in a museum in Corinth that depicts Ares trying to write an ode to carnage using a lyre. It looks exactly as awkward as you think a blood-drenched god in full armor, hunched over a delicate instrument like he's about to cry because it keeps going out of tune. That's another little-known quirk. Ares wants to be artistic. He just doesn't know how. He wants war to be appreciated, not feared. He wants someone to say, "What a beautiful spear thrust," instead of, Why are you like this? And so, he paces the edges of his own myths. Dramatic, misunderstood, and fundamentally uninvited. You follow him into the next story now toward a cradle, a crying baby, and a prophecy nobody wanted to read out loud. You're standing at the edge of Olympus, watching a god being born. It's a lot noisier than you expected. Hera has just given birth, and even the clouds wince. The baby in her arms is red-faced, angry, and already flailing tiny fists like he's trying to punch the air into submission. That's baby Ares, just minutes old and already vibrating with rage like someone told him nap time was a conspiracy. The Olympians gather at a polite distance. Hermes raises an eyebrow. Athena peers down without much concern. Hephaestus leans over and whispers, "He's going to be so loud," and then walks away to hammer something. Anything, just to drown out the wailing. Even Zeus doesn't rush over. He's pretending to be busy with a thundercloud. But everyone sees the sidelong glance. The king of gods isn't exactly thrilled. Ares wasn't prophesied. He wasn't planned. And unlike Athena, who burst from Zeus's forehead fully armored and ready to rewrite city planning laws, Ares arrived the usual way, messily, emotionally, and with bad vibes from the beginning. There's a story very hush-hush that a priestess once dreamed of a child born of pure wrath, who would bring more destruction with a wooden spoon than most heroes with a sword. That child, they whispered, would have no moral compass, just an angry engine and legs. Many think this was an early warning about Ares, though historians still argue whether that priestess was real or just someone ancient parents invoked to scare noisy toddlers into sleeping. But let's not skip ahead. You're in the nursery now, and it is, how do we say this, structurally compromised. The walls have been dented. The crib is on its third rebuild, and the poor nursemaid assigned to him is wearing a padded helmet. Baby Ares does not coo. He growls. He launches tiny arrows at the ceiling. He bit Apollo once, and nobody's let him forget it. Even Hera is exhausted. She looks down at him with the gaze of a parent who's already imagining boarding school, preferably in another dimension. And yet, there's something undeniably powerful about him. When Ares cries, the temperature spikes. When he kicks, nearby fields fail to yield crops for weeks. It's like the universe flinches every time he sneezes. You sit beside the nursemaid as she hums a lullaby made up entirely of battle shanties. It's the only thing that puts him to sleep. Not lullabies, not gentle harp tunes, marching songs. One fringe theory again, mostly written in the margins of poorly translated scrolls, claims that Ares's brain was wired to hear lullabies as insults. If you sang softly to him, he thought you were challenging his honor. By the time he could walk, Ares had learned to wrestle statues. He didn't win, but he tried. The muses watched from afar and kept a running tally of how many things he broke before lunch each day. 1 week. The number hit 47, and if you think toddler Ares had an off switch, think again. At one point, Hermes tried to give him a toy. A little wooden chariot with bronze wheels. Ares took one look at it, threw it off a cliff, and then jumped after it just to punch a cloud that looked at him funny on the way down. That cloud, by the way, still has trust issues. You wander down the marble halls of Olympus, watching the older gods adjust their schedules to avoid him. Athena times her library hours, so their paths never cross. Artemis teaches her hunting apprentices to move quietly if they see a red blur in the trees. Even Dionysus, party god of chaos and questionable decisions, draws the line at babysitting. And yet, Hera insists on bringing him to family events. It's always the same. Ares barrels in, drops something expensive, challenges someone to a duel over olives, and then pouts in this corner because nobody wants to spar. Even his pet, if you can call it that, is a rooster. Not a noble stallion, not a ferocious hound, a rooster. One that crows so loudly at dawn, it actually ruptured a nymph's eardrum once. It's a perfect match. Loud, angry, weirdly proud for no reason. The two of them go everywhere together. You've never seen a god look so emotionally attached to poultry. That said, Ares isn't all destruction. He wants to connect. He just doesn't know how. You once watched him try to offer a flower to a dryad. He held it like it was a live grenade. His face was set in what he thought was a smile, but looked more like a pre-fight grimace. The dryad fainted. The flower burst into flames, and Ares shrugged and said, "I tried." That's the thing he always tries. But his attempts land somewhere between endearing and deeply concerning. It's no surprise, then, that the Olympians began quietly sidelining him. He wasn't banned. Exactly. But if there was a meeting, he'd get the wrong scroll. If there was a feast, he'd be seated next to an empty chair in the world's most judgmental goat. By the time Ares reached adulthood, he was Olympus's nuclear option, unleashed only when things got so bad that polite diplomacy failed. And even then, the other gods winced as he charged in, yelling about vengeance and restoring balance by setting everything on fire. You step back now, leaving him in his solitary training field, where he practices battle cries that echo across the realms, shouting into nothing, demanding purpose, dreaming of glory. He just doesn't realize that nobody wants him to show up, especially not on board game night. You're lingering at the gleaming corridors of Olympus again, this time tiptoeing past an open doorway that smells faintly of olive oil, sweat, and passive resentment. Inside, the gods are gathering for an early dinner ambrosia, nectar, and whatever Dionysus claims counts as seasonal tapas. You pause in the shadows, watching them mingle. Athena already solving a logic puzzle mid-sip, Hermes cheating at something nobody's even playing, and Apollo trying to flirt with his reflection in a goblet. Then the door creaks, the laughter halts, someone mutters, "He's here." And just like that, the room tenses. It's subtle. A wine glass gets lowered. Someone scoots their chair a little farther from the table. Even Zeus reaches to rub his temples like he just remembered he has thundercloud taxes due. Ares storms in. You hear him before you see him, greaves clanging. Voice too loud for enclosed spaces, already describing a battle he didn't fight, but insists he would have won if the Spartans hadn't chickened out. This is the family dynamic nobody talks about. The Olympians sort of fear him, not in the way mortals fear storms or curses, but like you fear that one cousin who brings a switchblade to Thanksgiving and insists it's for carving turkey the old-fashioned way. Ares means well. At least, he thinks he does. He bellows a greeting, claps Poseidon on the back hard enough to dislocate something aquatic, and then immediately knocks over a gold serving tray trying to hug Hephaestus, who ducks under the table. You find yourself a spot in the corner near the fig platters. It's safer to observe. Athena doesn't even look up. She just says, "Try not to flip the table this time." Ares grins like it's an inside joke. It's not. See? Family meals with Ares follow a predictable script. He tries to impress someone. He tells a wildly exaggerated war story. Someone rolls their eyes. He notices. Tension escalates. Someone accidentally gets soup thrown on their toga. Zeus threatens lightning. Hera sighs. But there's a deeper undercurrent here. Ares isn't just Olympus's most violent family member. He's also the most insecure. He craves acknowledgement. Every outburst is a test. Do you see me? Do you respect me? The answer is usually a polite, Take Athena. For example, she embodies strategic warfare. She's every general's whisper, every well-timed ambush. She wins with minimal blood. Ares. He's the guy who runs into battle yelling and hopes someone's taking notes. Naturally, this drives him insane. Their rivalry simmers, even when the conversation is about fruit platters. Once, according to a dusty scroll found in an attic on Delos, Ares tried to critique Athena's battlefield diagrams by drawing a stick figure version of the perfect war plan, which just featured himself, 20 swords, and the words "rage mode" written in red wine. Hermes framed it. It still hangs behind the couch in his cloud condo, but it's not just Athena. Even Demeter, the goddess of grain, has sharper takedowns than Ares can dodge. During one particularly disastrous dinner, she calmly observed, "Perhaps if you spent less time yelling, more crops would grow in your wake." Ares tried to laugh it off, then punched a melon. The melon, for the record, was innocent. Now, as you watch him pace the length of the table, trying to contribute to a conversation about diplomacy with phrases like, "or we could just crush them," you realize something important. Ares wants to be part of the team. He wants in-jokes. He wants invitations. He wants anyone to ask him how his week was and actually listen. But no one knows how to handle him. Hestia offers him bread, always. She's the only one who treats him like a person instead of a walking explosion. In return, Ares calls her the chillest flame and swears he'll destroy anyone who disrespects her, which is both sweet and concerning. Even Apollo has limits. When Ares once tried to join a lute circle, he played so aggressively that 3 strings snapped and 1 nymph fainted. Apollo told him gently, "Maybe percussion's more your style," and handed him a single cymbal, just one, no pair. And yet, despite the awkward silences and sidelong glances, Ares never stops showing up. Every meal, every festival, every meeting he wasn't technically invited to, he still comes. With a grin and a sword and that stubborn, almost endearing refusal to realize when he's not wanted. You follow him now. As the meal winds down, the gods trickle away in 1s and 2s, muttering excuses. Ares lingers, scooping extra olives into a pouch, muttering something about needing fuel for training. Then he turns and just for a moment catches your eye. There's something strange in his expression. Not fury, not even frustration, just a quiet flicker of hope. And then it's gone, replaced by the familiar scowl and bravado as he storms out, trailing breadcrumbs and unfinished stories. You stay behind, watching the gods resume their chatter now that the storm has passed. And you wonder, what does it mean to be a god no one trusts, but no one can quite ignore? You're walking beside a stream in the high hills of Olympus, where the air is thinner and the trees grow in strategic formation. Perfect symmetry, nothing random, which can only mean one thing. Athena's been here, and sure enough, there she is. She's seated on a stone bench shaped like a scroll, etching lines into a gleaming bronze tablet with a stylus that hums faintly with wisdom. Her owl perches nearby, head tilted at you in a way that says, "I know your secrets." Also, you dropped a crumb. Then, like thunder in a library, Ares arrives. Boom! Clank! Dust cloud. Sword out. Athena doesn't even look up. It's not a real battlefield, she says calmly. We're just drafting theoretical maneuvers. Ares grunts. So you admit I would win? Athena sighs. The sigh of someone who's had this conversation every Wednesday for 600 years. You sit down quietly behind a low bush, because what's about to happen isn't war. It's warfare, the kind that involves no blood, but lots of bruised egos. And in the world of sibling rivalries, few are as ancient or as lopsided as this one. See, Athena and Ares are 2 sides of the same coin. She represents wisdom and tactical warfare. She plots, she prepares, she understands that battles are puzzles with very sharp consequences. Ares just wants to flip the board. He paces in a wide circle, muttering things like, "I once knocked out 2 centaurs with 1 boot," while Athena politely recalibrates her abacus. She waits. She knows the moment is coming. And then it does. Ares makes his move. Literally, he lunges toward the table, dramatically slams a wooden figurine down onto the bronze board, and shouts, "Flank attack." Athena raises 1 eyebrow. "You placed your troops in a swamp." Ares blinks. "Your cavalry would drown. Your archers have no line of sight, and your siege weapons are currently pointing at your own command tent." Ares blinks again. Somewhere, a satyr giggles. This is what happens every time. Ares tries to challenge Athena on her turf. She dismantles his strategy with precision, and he stomps off saying something about how real warriors don't need maps. Historians still argue whether this sibling feud was meant to illustrate the dual nature of conflict, or if it was just the ancient Greeks' way of mocking people who mistake volume for victory. There are vase paintings that show Athena coolly disarming Ares with a fan. That's not metaphor. That actually happened. You stroll behind them now, watching as Ares circles back, undeterred by logic. "Okay, but what if I explode the swamp?" he says. Athena doesn't answer. She's too busy redrawing her battle lines with a single precise flick of her stylus. Ares watches in frustration. He scratches his chin. He tries again. "What if I yell really loud and scare their horses into trampling the archers?" Athena pauses. "Oh, interesting," she says. "If the horses were rabbits and the archers were cardboard." Ares puffs up like a puffer fish in chainmail. "You think I can't win a real fight? You don't win fights." "Brother," she says evenly, "you outlast them." Loudly. Oof. You'd think he'd explode. But he doesn't. Not this time. Instead, he sits. It's weird. Ares doesn't sit. He squats aggressively. Sure, he lounges like a tiger with opinions, but now he just sits on a nearby rock, quiet, watching her tablet. I tried to help, he mutters. Athena finally looks at him. I know, she says, but help isn't just swinging harder. There's a beat of silence. Then the owl hoots loud, sharp, judgmental, and the spell breaks. Ares stands abruptly. Whatever. You're all scared of me anyway. And just like that, he storms off, stomping through the grass like it owes him money. Athena shakes her head and resumes drawing battle formations in soft metallic strokes. You lean closer and notice she's added a new symbol to the map, a chaotic red blur labeled unreliable ally possible distraction. That's the thing with Ares. Even the gods don't know where to place him. You walk back through the quiet hills, your feet brushing the carefully arranged stones of Athena's war garden. In the distance, you hear a tree snap, probably Ares, probably trying to punch a metaphor again. And you can't help but wonder what happens to a god who always brings the storm but never gets to command the forecast. You're following a trail of broken branches now, deeper into the woods near the edge of mortal territory where myths fray at the edges and weird things tend to happen when no one's supervising. And there he is again, Ares, but not in armor this time. He's shirtless, barefoot, and well furious, obviously. But there's something different about this tantrum, because he's not yelling in Greek. He's snorting. And that's when you realize Ares has turned into a boar. Yes, a literal, tusked, mud-coated boar. The kind that charges through sacred groves and wrecks ceremonies with reckless grunting and zero apologies. Why? Good question. The gods never explain these things. Maybe it was a punishment. Maybe it was a dare. Or maybe, just maybe, Ares was so angry that his body said, you know what? Words are too civilized. Tusk it. You step back as he snorts again, rooting around furiously in a patch of sacred mushrooms. His eyes are bloodshot. His tail flicks like it has grievances of its own. And just up ahead, an entire wedding party is trying very hard to pretend this isn't happening. The bride's veil is already in tatters. The priest has climbed a fig tree. Someone's uncle is shouting, it's just a metaphor, right? But no. Ares the boar charges straight through the ceremony. Tables flip. Platters of honeyed lamb go flying. Flower girls scatter like leaves in a storm. And just before he crashes into the ceremonial harpist, he suddenly pivots, spots a statue of Athena, and rams that instead. The statue topples. The harpist faints. The gods in the clouds above quietly adjust their scorecards. You duck behind a bush and try not to make eye contact. Ares, now panting, finally stops mid-trample. Slowly, almost sheepishly, the boar form begins to fade. The fur recedes, the tusks shrink, and soon, there stands Ares once more naked, muddy, and holding half a wedding cake. He blinks. Did I win? You'd be surprised how often he asks that. Now, here's the wild part. This wasn't an isolated incident. There's a fringe historian out of Mytilene old scrolls, half-burned, mostly wine-stained, who insists that Ares had a habit of turning into animals during emotional overloads. The most frequent, boars, bulls, and once, during a particularly tense festival, a rooster that attacked a theater critic. Scholars still argue whether these shape-shifting episodes were symbolic or just Olympian-level meltdowns with a flair for the dramatic. Either way, they usually ended in property damage and someone crying near a shrub. You trail after him as he wanders off into the forest again, muttering to himself. He's replaying the wedding crash in his head, trying to justify it. That harpist looks suspicious. The lamb was undercooked. The statue started it. A few dryads peek out from behind trees. They recognize him. One sighs, picks up a broom, and starts sweeping petals back into a pile. They're used to this. Because here's the thing about Ares. He wants to be part of mortal rituals. He really does. He shows up at weddings thinking he'll protect the union with the spirit of sacred combat. He attends hunts believing he's honoring the primal essence of life and death. And somehow, every single time, he ends up trampling the charcuterie board. One time, he joined a coming-of-age festival in Thessaly. He tried to bless a young warrior by headbutting a ceremonial shield. The shield shattered. So did the temple column behind it. The boy ran away and became a peaceful shepherd. So, technically, Ares helped prevent a war. You stroll along a stream now, listening to him curse softly at his reflection. They don't get it. He says, I am the ritual. You almost feel bad. Because deep down, he's not trying to cause chaos. He is chaos, like a thunderstorm that wants to be invited to tea parties. You arrive at a clearing where hunters once gathered. Ares kicks at the dirt, scowling. Boar form again. That's the third time this decade. Then he perks up. Though I did eat a wreath, that felt symbolic. You just nod. Safer that way. And as the sun sets, painting the clouds with shades of bronze and ash, you begin to see the pattern. Ares doesn't ruin things because he's evil. He ruins them because no one ever taught him how to be part of a thing. He wasn't trained to sit quietly or bow politely. He was forged to roar and break and conquer. But now, there's less to conquer. Fewer wars, more dinner parties, more harpists. And Ares, he still thinks trampling a wedding altar is a form of affection. So you follow him into the evening, watching as he wipes cake off his chest, still muttering battle strategies about bridesmaids and chair arrangements, because deep down, the god of war just wants someone to hand him an invitation that doesn't say +1 tusk. You're back on Olympus now, sort of. It's the edge of the clouds, near one of those shimmering marble courtyards the gods use when they want to pretend they're casually bumping into each other. The kind of place where everything looks spontaneous but was probably scheduled 3 centuries in advance. And there she is, Aphrodite. Radiant, effortless, lounging in a golden chair like she was born to recline, which, arguably, she was. A soft breeze plays with her hair in a way that would look ridiculous on anyone else. But on her, it's just mythic. Then you hear it. Clank, crash, a loud, "Hey, babe." Ares has entered the scene. Now, you might assume that the goddess of love and the god of war would cancel each other out, like fire and perfume. But no, for reasons no one entirely understands, these two had a thing, and not a quiet thing. Either, not a sneak around behind the scroll shelf sort of thing. More of a, let's make the air itself uncomfortable kind of vibe. You hide behind a Corinthian column as Ares swaggers toward her, trying to look casual while knocking over 3 vases and stepping on a peacock. He reaches her, leans in close, and grins like a boy who just learned the word flirt. "Miss me." Aphrodite doesn't look up from her compact mirror. Your helmet's on backwards. Ares fumbles. Now, let's be clear. This wasn't some tale of fated love. It was chaotic. It was ill-advised. And it was very public. Hephaestus, Aphrodite's actual husband, found out. Of course, not because the gods whispered, but because Ares and Aphrodite once tried to sneak off during a feast and only made it about 10 feet before knocking over the ceremonial gong. What followed was arguably the most awkward moment in divine history. Hephaestus, ever the craftsman, decided to teach them a lesson not with fire or fists, but with engineering. He built a trap, a golden net, nearly invisible, placed over the bed where the 2 lovers most frequently tangled themselves. One night, right on cue, Ares and Aphrodite fell into it. Literally, and the moment they got comfortable, snap, the net tightened, locked, glowed, and, just to twist the dagger, called the whole pantheon to come look. You are now crouched awkwardly among a crowd of gods pretending not to make eye contact. Poseidon whispers, "I didn't even know nets could blush." Apollo writes a ballad about it before breakfast. Even Zeus, who has 0 right to judge anyone, raises an eyebrow and mutters something about poor impulse control. Ares, he's mortified. He tries to act tough, tries to shout, but it's hard to look commanding when you're tangled in gold filigree with your girlfriend chewing bubblegum made of ambrosia and rolling her eyes. Aphrodite, for her part, seems bored. It's almost as if she expected this, the aftermath. Complicated. Technically, Hephaestus demanded compensation. Technically, Ares paid it. A giant boar hide and a basket of very uncomfortable-looking cherries. But socially, the damage was done. The gossip spread. Mortals started adding unfaithful entanglements to Ares's mythic resume. Temples to Aphrodite stopped placing her next to war shrines. And Ares, he stopped looking quite so dangerous. Because nothing breaks a war god's mystique like being caught in bed with his sandals still on. But that didn't stop him. You're watching now as he tries again. He presents Aphrodite with a rose, a real one. Not on fire, not poisoned. Just a rose. She takes it, sniffs it, smiles. For a second, there's actual softness. Then Ares says, "I ripped it off a hydra bush. Still bleeds a little." Aphrodite puts it down. Because here's the thing. Ares never quite understands why Aphrodite liked him. He thinks it's the muscles, the battle scars, the way his voice shakes buildings. But maybe it was something else. Maybe she saw the lonely chaos beneath the armor. The part of him that wants to be wanted, even if he can't quite say it without shouting. There's a fringe theory found in a cracked papyrus stored behind a fish market in Rhodes that says Aphrodite used Ares as a kind of emotional mirror. When she was tired of beauty being her entire identity, she'd lean into his rawness, his refusal to be subtle, and Ares. He liked being needed, even if it wasn't love. It was attention, but attention fades. And Ares. He always burns it down trying to keep it. Now you're walking with him, after yet another failed afternoon. Aphrodite has vanished in a swirl of perfume and mild disappointment. Ares stands alone, staring at the empty chair like it owes him a rematch. She laughed once. He mumbles, at one of my jokes, I think you don't correct him. And as he trudges back toward his forge, alone again, you begin to realize that beneath all the rage and bravado, there's a god who doesn't know how to be soft. Who wants to play the love game but only knows how to charge? Not exactly board game night material. You're standing at the edge of a battlefield again, but this time, it's different. The sky is thick with smoke. Spears glint in the sun. Banners flap. You're in the middle of the Trojan War. And here comes Ares, finally in his element. You'd think this would be his moment, centuries of rage, humiliation, and misread social cues finally coalescing into the perfect, chaotic masterpiece. War with capital W. Mortals clashing in grand, poetic violence. Legends rising, cities falling. But somehow, Ares still manages to ruin it. You see, the Trojan War had rules, sort of loose ones. Some gods picked sides. Some gods sat it out. Athena, naturally, took the Greeks. Aphrodite backed Troy because Paris gave her a golden apple and everyone else just kind of accepted that as enough reason to start a 10-year bloodbath. Ares. Well, Ares tried to stay neutral for about 5 minutes, and then he changed sides 3 times. In one afternoon, he claimed it was strategic. What it actually was, spite. He saw Athena winning, and if Athena was winning, Ares had to do the opposite. Even if that meant standing next to enemies, cheering on people he didn't understand, and yelling things like, yeah, go Troy, or wait, was it Sparta today? Historians still argue whether Ares was truly on any one side or just there to make sure no one had a good time. You crouch beside the Greek camp one night as the soldiers whisper about him, not respectfully, not fearfully, more like annoyance. He showed up, screamed for 10 minutes, then left when someone told him we ran out of shields. He tried to arm wrestle the horses. I think he challenged a catapult to a duel. Even mortals, bloodied and exhausted, rolled their eyes when Ares made his grand, thunderous entrance. Because when Athena showed up, they won battles. When Ares arrived, they lost count of casualties, often their own. You now follow him across the field as he rampages swinging, shouting, knocking over tents that are very much not the enemy's. He spears a cart full of medical supplies, then tries to cover by yelling. That wheel looked Trojan. And then he sees Diomedes. Now, Diomedes, Greek hero, smart fighter, favorite of Athena, is not impressed. He's already wounded Aphrodite earlier in the war. So when Ares rushes him, sword blazing, eyes glowing red, you expect carnage. But what happens? Diomedes throws a spear. It hits Ares directly in the stomach. And not metaphorically. Ares screams. He screams like someone stepped on a Lego the size of Mount Olympus. He screams so loudly the battle stops. Even the dying pause to look up and go, really? Then truly on-brand, Ares flies back to Olympus to tattle. You watch as he storms into Zeus's court, clutching his midsection like a kid with a scraped knee. They hurt me. He howls. Diomedes stabbed me, and Athena let him. This is an outrage. Zeus, throned and thunderous, does not blink. You brought it on yourself, he says, and Ares. He just stands there, seething, realizing even his father thinks he overreacted. You feel the heat coming off of him. It's not just divine blood, it's humiliation. His war, his moment, ruined, and worst of all, no one's surprised. You return to the battlefield a few days later. Ares isn't there. Athena is. She moves like the wind, precise, unstoppable. almost bored. Mortals cheer for her. They plan around her. She gets statues. Eris. He gets graffiti on ruined walls. God of stepping on rakes. There's a theory scribbled on a cracked amphora buried near Troy that some soldiers saw Ares weeping near a riverbank after that defeat. Not sobbing. Just one single tear. Like even his tear ducts had rage issues. You can almost picture it. The god of war. Alone. Wondering why he never gets remembered for winning, just for showing up, yelling, and bleeding unnecessarily. You walk through the battlefield's aftermath. The war drags on, the gods squabble, and Ares, he vanishes again. Because even in a war tailor-made for him, Ares still manages to break the game board and blame the pieces. You find yourself now in the glittering Hall of Justice on Olympus, a rare place where even gods get questioned. And the marble floor is polished so smooth, it reflects every awkward shuffle of divine sandals. Today, Ares is on trial, which, let's be honest, is overdue. You sit on a bench in the back, surrounded by an audience of gods pretending not to be entertained. Hermes is already taking bets. Apollo has composed a trial soundtrack on his lyre. Even Hades has made the trek topside, sipping pomegranate wine and muttering, "This should be rich." At the center of the room stands Ares, chained not because he needs to be, but because he insists. He says it looks dramatic. He wants the full, misunderstood anti-hero look. The chains jingle when he gestures. It's very extra. The charge. Murder. Not battlefield stuff. No, this is a personal vendetta. Ares killed Halorotheus, son of Poseidon. Depending on who tells the story, it was either a noble act of protection, the guy was allegedly attacking Ares' daughter, or a reckless execution that ignored every rule Olympus pretended to have. Ares claims it was justice. Poseidon claims it was murder. Zeus just wants it over with before brunch. Historians still argue whether this was the first divine trial or just the first one the other gods bothered to document because the tea was that good. Either way, it's the rare moment where Ares isn't yelling across a battlefield, he's being judged. Publicly, under the weight of his own mythology. He doesn't handle it well. "Are you kidding me?" he bellows. "You all kill mortals. That's half your hobbies." Artemis shoots people for blinking wrong. Artemis, from the gallery. "At least I'm selective." Ares growls, rattles his chains. "I was defending my daughter. Isn't that noble? Isn't that what a hero would do?" Athena coughs. Ares spins. "Oh, what? You never killed anyone with a plan and a smug metaphor." The court goes silent. Then Zeus speaks, voice low and crackling. "This isn't about killing. This is about control. You acted alone, without counsel, without restraint, again. And there it is, the real problem. Because Ares doesn't consult, he doesn't negotiate. He erupts, and when that eruption leaves a godling dead, the other Olympians are forced to clean up after him. Still, the case is murky. Even Apollo admits Halorotheus had weird vibes. No one wants to say it aloud, but most of them agree the guy had it coming. So after hours of shouting, sobbing by Ares, obviously, and Hera trying to speed things along with passive-aggressive gavel taps, Zeus finally declares, not guilty, but warned. Ares puffs up like he just won a tournament. "Hey, told you, next time I'll use 2 swords. Zeus raises a hand. "No next time. There will be consequences." The chains fall away. And Ares. He flexes. Yes, flexes. Right there in the courtroom. You watch the gods file out, muttering. No one congratulates him. No one claps him on the back. Even Hermes just pockets his betting scroll and says, could have been messier. Outside, Ares lingers by the steps, squinting at the sky like he's waiting for applause. None comes. He turns to you. "They don't get it," he says. "They sit around judging while I'm the only one who does anything." And sure, he's got a point. But also maybe, just maybe that's why they don't trust him. Because justice isn't about swinging first and crying later. It's about restraint, thought, timing. And those are words Ares has never once written down. You follow him as he storms off again, fists clenched, muttering his defense to nobody. "I protected my blood. I stood up. I acted, and he did. But maybe, just maybe, it's not enough to be right if everyone still remembers you as the god who threw a murder trial like a toddler, throws a feast plate. Because even in justice, Ares turns everything into a battlefield, and he never quite learns when to put the sword down. You're back at Olympus again, but this time the tension's lighter. There's a table set up in the sunlit atrium carved from cloudstone and decorated with celestial snacks. Someone's brought nectar wine. There's a bowl of olives that may or may not be watching you. And in the center of it all, a game board. Yes, a literal board. Painted tiles, bronze figurines, dice carved from marble. It's game night on Mount Olympus, and against all odds, Ares was invited. Kind of. He wasn't on the scroll, but he overheard Hermes talking about it and just showed up with a bag of jerky, a throwing knife, and his usual lack of understanding of social cues. "Let's go," he shouts, slamming both fists on the table. Everyone flinches. You slide into a seat near the snacks. This is going to be a long night. The game is something like a divine version of Risk meets Clue. Athena is red. Apollo is gold. Artemis refuses to pick a color and plays as Shadow Wolf. Hermes has a suspicious number of extra pieces. Dionysus is technically a spectator, but he keeps adding rules that nobody agrees on. Ares picks black. Naturally. Warrior color, he mutters. They start. The first few turns go okay. Ares rolls high. He conquers a province. He roars like he just defeated an empire. Everyone else politely nods. Then Athena moves one tile into his territory. What's that supposed to mean? Ares booms. It's a strategy. She replies coolly. Try it sometime. Boom, he slams the dice. You can't just... Hermes cuts in. Bro, it's literally your turn. Ares growls. His eye twitches. He accuses Artemis of cheating, even though she hasn't spoken in 20 minutes. He says Dionysus's wine messed with the math. He calls the rulebook a personal attack. Historians still argue whether this incident is what officially ended Olympus's weekly game night tradition. But on that particular evening, the answer becomes clear when Ares flips the board. Not metaphorically, like actually flips it. Dice scatter. Figurines go flying. Athena ducks just in time. The olive bowl tips into Apollo's lap. Hermes starts clapping. But ironically, Ares stands, triumphant. I win, he declares. Apollo blinks. You just knocked over the board. Exactly. Ares says, victory through decisive chaos. That's not a thing. Artemis mutters. Ares leans in. It is now. You sneak a cookie off the table before it becomes shrapnel. The gods stare at him, not angry, just tired. Athena quietly picks up a pawn, brushes it off, and says, this is why we don't invite you. Ares's shoulders tense. There it is, that flicker of hurt again, buried under all the noise. He looks around, expecting a laugh, a high five. Something, but there's just the quiet clatter of Apollo patting wine out of his toga. Then Ares storms out, muttering, whatever, you're all scared of real competition. Which might be the saddest part, because he really thinks he's playing the game. He just doesn't realize it's not about winning, it's about being there, taking turns, laughing, losing gracefully, and not turning a game piece into a projectile weapon. You find him later, sulking near a storm cloud, tossing dice into a crater. They don't play right, he mutters. They're all smug and careful. I bring passion. You nod, gently, but passion isn't always the problem. Sometimes it's the volume. And sometimes, the gods just want to spend an evening without rebuilding the table from scratch. Because Ares, bless him, doesn't play games. He wages them. And nobody sleeps well when war shows up to a potluck. You're walking through a grove of shrines, now low stone offerings tucked beneath olive trees, small flickering oil lamps nestled into carved alcoves. The air smells like ash, time, and unspoken disappointment. This is the sacred field of lesser temples. And you're noticing something peculiar. Every god has a space here. Some are grand. Athena's shrine is clean, geometric, and always has fresh scrolls or owl feathers. Apollo's is golden, fragrant with laurel and terribly full of poems. Even Dionysus's shrine is chaotic, but busy wine spills. Lyres abandoned mid-verse, and one very confused goat. But Ares's shrine is sad, small, unkempt. Dusty. It's half covered in weeds. Someone left a cracked spear and a broken bronze plate with a note that just says, "Plus, don't come back." It's hard not to stare. The god of war, once supposedly feared, supposedly honored, gets a shrine that looks like it's been used more by raccoons than worshippers. A rusted helmet sits off to the side like even it gave up. You crouch to examine a burned-out candle. There's graffiti nearby, faint but legible. Ares doesn't listen. Another one. Scratched deeper. Athena helps. Ares just hurts. That's the thing. Even among mortals, Ares never got much love. Sure, warriors might call his name in the heat of battle, but afterward, after the blood dried and the songs were sung, it was Athena they thanked for the victory, or Zeus for the strength, or Apollo for the glory. Ares was just the noise. He didn't inspire cities. He didn't get festivals. He wasn't associated with justice or pride or honor. He was associated with regret. Historians still debate why this is. After all, war was a constant reality for ancient Greeks. Shouldn't the god of war have more prestige? But maybe that's the point. The Greeks respected skill, discipline, strategy, everything. Ares famously lacked. Even Sparta, the most war-obsessed city-state, didn't love Ares. They feared him, prayed to him last, just in case, like making sure the dog stays outside when company comes. There's even a fringe belief recorded in the works of one obscure Corinthian priest that Ares was never meant to have temples at all. He was more of a wandering wrath invoked, endured, then politely dismissed. You wander down a path of shattered columns, another shrine, even smaller, a chipped statue of Ares, eyes narrowed, fists clenched, but moss creeping up one leg like nature itself is trying to forget. Ares appears beside you suddenly. "I saw that," he says, pointing to the graffiti. You don't speak. He stares at the broken spear on the altar, picks it up, turns it over in his hands. "Mortals used to call me before battle, every time. I heard their hearts pounding, their fear, their need for fire." His voice trails off. You ask if anyone still does. He shrugs. "Sometimes, but only when they're already losing." That hits different, because Ares isn't the god of winning wars. He's the god of being in one, of blood and rage and confusion. He's the scream, not the strategy, the punch, not the victory speech. And people only scream when it's already going badly. You sit on the edge of the altar as he sets the cracked helmet upright again. "They say I never had temples because I couldn't build anything," he mutters. "But I tried once. Built a hall made of shields, bones, and melted swords." You ask what happened. Athena called it obnoxiously thematic. Zeus had it dismantled. He laughs, but it's short. There's silence as a breeze rattles the dry olive leaves overhead. Ares doesn't break it. He just stands there, god of war, unshaved, unsung, trying to fix a shrine even raccoons don't respect. And you realize something else. The absence of worship isn't what breaks him. It's the absence of invitation. He's not rejected because he's unloved. He's rejected because he's unwanted afterward. When the shouting stops, when the blood dries, when the games begin, nobody calls Ares to play nice. They call him to clean up their worst instincts, then blame him for being messy. You walk with him away from the shrine now, through rows of other temples that glow brighter, stand taller, echo with thanks and incense. Ares doesn't look back, and you start to understand why game night was never meant for him. Because who wants the god of chaos to hang around, especially when the war's already over? You're trudging behind Ares now, down a lonely path that leads absolutely nowhere important, which, frankly, is exactly where he belongs on days like this. The sky's overcast. Fitting. He's kicking rocks, dragging his sword in the dirt like a child with a stick, and muttering under his breath about mortal dating rituals and people being allergic to passion. It takes you a second, but then it clicks. Oh no, he's trying to flirt again. You brace yourself. You've seen Ares in many forms. Shouting, sulking, occasionally snorting as a boar, but romantic Ares. That's a genre of discomfort all its own. Imagine a firework trying to write a sonnet. Loud, bright, utterly unreadable. Up ahead, a wood nymph is tending to a stream, gentle, graceful, humming some ancient tune no mortal ever wrote down. Ares sees her and immediately straightens up, smears mud off his face, and flexes so hard he accidentally dents his own breastplate. "Watch and learn," he whispers. "You do? Against your better judgment." Ares walks up to her and just stands there, silent, flexing, breathing like a bear in a gym locker room. She looks up, blinks. "Can I help you?" Ares clears his throat. "You dropped this." He hands her a rock. She stares at it, then back at him. "It's symbolic." He says, "It's heavy." She replies, "It represents the weight of your beauty. You're cringing so hard you dislocate an eardrum." She hands the rock back and says, "That's sweet, but I'm seeing someone." Ares nods, face twitching. "Who?" "Literally. Boss? Really? Anyone's." "Ouch!" He turns, mutters, "No accounting for taste," and stomps off right into a bramble bush. It scratches his leg. He roars like he's been shot with a divine harpoon and tries to fight it. The bush wins. You help pull twigs out of his hair as he grumbles. "I thought I was being subtle." That's the problem. Ares has no dimmer switch. His version of affection is always turned up to 11. He mistakes intensity for intimacy, thinks growling someone's name is romantic, thinks punching a tree to show your emotional availability is wooing. There's a fringe theory scribbled on a shattered stone tablet in Euboea that Ares once commissioned a statue of himself embracing Aphrodite with his shield. When the sculptor added softness to the pose, Ares destroyed the piece and declared, "Too vulnerable. Add fire." He never did get it. You trail after him through a meadow where lovers once tied ribbons to olive trees. Ares tries to do the same, but ends up tying his ribbon too tight, snapping the branch, and yelling, "Love is pain." Somewhere, a turtle looks up and immediately regrets making eye contact. And yet, beneath all the chaos, there's a real ache here. Because Ares isn't heartless. He's just never learned how to handle a heart. He wants to love. He just thinks love means storming gates, shouting devotion, tearing down walls, and then wondering why no one invites him in. Athena once said, "Ares treats romance like a battlefield, but no one wins when the walls fall inward." You catch up to him now. He's sitting on a boulder, looking genuinely defeated. "Do I come on too strong?" he asks. You don't answer, because if he's asking the question, maybe there's still hope. He pulls something from his satchel. It's a bouquet of swords, tiny, ornate ones, bent into the shape of flowers. He made them. "I was gonna give this to someone," he mumbles. "Thought it was poetic." You blink. It kind of is. Sharp, clumsy, sincere. Ares, distilled into metal origami. You nod. He throws the bouquet into a bush anyway. She wouldn't have gotten it. He says, pretending not to care, but you both know better. Because when it comes to love, Ares doesn't lack heart. He just never learned how to leave his armor off. And that's why, even among gods of passion and poetry, the god of war always ends up alone at the end of the feast, quietly asking if anyone wants to play a two-player game where feelings don't get mangled. Spoiler, they usually say no. You're standing now in the rocky outskirts of ancient Sparta, where the land itself seems carved from resolves. The wind is sharp, the air tastes like iron, and even the goats have a military posture. Welcome to the only place on Earth where Ares gets some respect. Sort of. He walks taller here, not because the people adore him, but because they at least understand him. In most cities, Ares is an afterthought, an echo of screaming. But in Sparta, he has an altar, not a glorious temple. No frescoes or poets humming in praise, but a practical, weather-beaten space where young warriors leave offerings before battle. Sometimes it's a piece of armor, sometimes a promise, sometimes just blood. You watch as a line of teenage boys approaches the altar stoic, nervous, trying not to flinch. One of them places a single, sharpened tooth on the stone and mutters a prayer. Ares, watching unseen, actually looks moved. They get it, he says to you. They're not praying to win, they're praying to survive. And that's the thing. Sparta didn't ask Ares for triumph. They asked him for endurance, for rage when the shield breaks, for noise in the silence after your brother falls. They treated him not as a noble god, but as a necessary one. Still, even here, they're careful. Spartan rituals to Ares were famously specific and famously restrained. Before battle, warriors would offer black dogs in sacrifice. Dark, untamed, loyal, and violent, just like him. But afterward, they'd turn back to Apollo, or Artemis, or Zeus. Because even in a city that trained boys to kill with bare hands, Ares was more tool than patron. Useful, but not beloved. There's a fringe account painted clumsily on a cracked kylix unearthed near the Eurotas River that claims a Spartan elder once told a group of boys, "We honor Ares the way we honor fire. Warm your blade by him, but do not invite him into your home." Ares heard that once. Never forgot it. You're following him now through the Spartan barracks. Soldiers pass by nodding, never bowing, respect without reverence. Their expressions say, "You taught us pain," but also, "Please don't stay for lunch." He grins anyway. One of them, a scarred veteran, walks up and says, "I prayed to you before Thermopylae." Ares puffs up. "I lost my leg." The man adds, "But I didn't cry. Thanks." Then walks away. That's the best compliment Ares has had all decade. You pause in the training yard. Young warriors wrestle, spar, fall, bleed, laugh. Ares watches them with something dangerously close to pride. They don't need temples, he says. They are the temple. And he's right in a way. Ares' worship isn't incense and music. It's clenched fists, grit in your teeth, the sting of sweat in an open wound. His presence isn't a blessing. It's a bruise that reminds you you're still alive. But even here, his best city, he's not at the center of the story. Athena's statues stand taller. Apollo's festivals are louder. Even Artemis's hunting grounds get more foot traffic. Because ultimately, Ares isn't a god you keep around. He's a god you call when the walls fall, and then you hope he leaves. He walks with you now to the edge of the city. Pausing at a cliff overlooking the valley, the wind tugs at his cloak. He stares out at the mountains, then whispers, "They used to shout my name." You ask when they stopped. He doesn't answer. Instead, he picks up a stone and hurls it across the valley. It doesn't land. It just keeps going, divine force wrapped in forgotten prayer. You stand in silence. Because sometimes, even the loudest gods are haunted by the quiet. You're standing in a sun-scorched field now. Dry grass crackling beneath your feet. Distant hills blurred in the heat. There's an odd hush here, like the ground is bracing itself. And then, you hear it. Tiny stomps, shouts, chaos. You turn. Oh no, the children are coming. Not mortal ones, Ares' children. And let's just say, they take after their father. First comes Phobos, literally fear. Small, wiry, eyes too wide. He hisses at butterflies and once punched his own shadow. Behind him is Deimos, panic. Bulkier, but never still. He twitches constantly, like he's always hearing a distant war drum no one else can hear. Then the twins, Terror and Dread. Not their official names, just what most people call them after 15 minutes of exposure. They're always smiling, never a good sign. And in the back, slouching like he didn't ask to be here, is Eros. Yes, that Eros, god of love, son of Aphrodite. But according to some tales, also Ares' kid. Let's just say the family dynamic is mixed. You watch as Ares tries to coach them through a training exercise. He's built a small obstacle course. There are fake enemies, collapsing towers, and one unfortunate wooden goat painted to look like Zeus. Remember, Ares barks. War is instinct. Don't think, just charge. Phobos screams and tackles a bush. Deimos runs the wrong direction entirely. The twins try to set the goat on fire. Eros sighs and conjures a heart-shaped arrow, aiming it at his own foot. Ares beams. It's chaos. Perfect chaos. And yet, something's off. You notice it in his eyes. He's watching them not like a proud father, but like someone searching for a legacy, for proof that his name means something more than smashed altars and flipped game boards. They're trying, he says, almost defensively. You nod. Carefully. There's a fringe scroll found in a collapsed attic in Argos, badly water-damaged but barely legible, which claims Ares once tried to start a junior war league, a mentorship program for divine offspring. It lasted 3 days. Day 1, training. Day 2, injuries. Day 3, the temple burned down and someone used a sacred scroll as a snack. Ares never tried again. You watch now as Phobos bites the air and yells, "Victory!" For no discernible reason. They've got heart, Ares says. They just need polishing. But here's the truth. His children don't want to be polished. They want to rage. They're wild, raw, untamed. They are exactly what Ares built them to be, and deep down, he knows that's not necessarily a good thing. Deimos runs up with a lizard. Is this a weapon? Ares blinks. Maybe. Eros finally fires his arrow not at an enemy, but at the sky. It explodes into sparkles and an uncomfortable memory about your high school crush. You blink it away. You sit beside Ares as he rubs his temples. They're not like Athena's kids, he mutters. Her students become judges, lawmakers, city builders. He looks out at his brood. Mine become warning labels. There's silence. And then he laughs short, bitter. I wanted to raise warriors. Maybe I just raise noise. You want to argue, but you can't, because you see it. 2. The gods of Olympus have children to extend their influence. Athena's inspire thought. Apollo's spark art. Dionysus's bring joy or madness, depending on dosage. Ares's, they bring mayhem. And when the dust settles, there's rarely anything left to build on. Still, they're his, and he loves them the only way he knows how, by teaching them to survive in a world that never really wanted him. Either, you watch as he calls them in gruff, loud, but oddly gentle. All right, warriors, breaks over. Let's try the obstacle course again. No biting the air this time. Phobos nods solemnly, then immediately bites the air again. You sigh, Ares sighs, and together, you watch the next generation of half-formed war gods run screaming into the simulation like it's a hug. Because for Ares, parenting isn't about guiding. It's about preparing your children to fight even when no one wants them at the party. Especially then. You're now deep within the dusty corridors of a forgotten temple archive, tucked beneath Mount Helicon, one of those sacred places where myths were once recorded by candlelight and poor ventilation. Scrolls line the walls like wrinkled ghosts. Some are crisp and revered, others less so. You spot a cracked urn labeled Ares, miscellaneous, and that says it all, doesn't it? Because while Zeus gets tomes and Athena has curated anthologies with embossed covers, Ares gets the drawer everyone forgets to alphabetize. You unroll one of the scrolls. It's a battle account, bloody, frantic, full of sudden violence. The writer starts strong. Ares descended like fire into the field, but then abruptly ends with, and then it got weird. Someone's armor caught fire. We never found the left leg. You try another. It's a comedic poem mocking Ares's battle cry. More squawk than scream. You check a third scroll. It's just a doodle of Ares falling downstairs. That's the thing. Ares is everywhere in a mythology. And yet, he's almost always a side note. A cautionary tale. A comic relief. A disruption. Historians still argue whether this marginalization was intentional. Was it because the Greeks distrusted brute force? Or because their culture, rooted in arete excellence, placed more value on wisdom and self-control than chaotic strength? The truth may be simpler. Ares, wasn't misunderstood. He was entirely understood, and no one liked what they saw. You're walking now through a scribe's chamber. Ink pots, styluses, a half-eaten olive, and you notice something strange. Ares shows up in volume. There are lots of mentions, but very little depth. Where Athena gets monologues and inner conflict, Ares gets entered the fray, screamed, left. A few fringe scholars, usually mocked at symposiums, have suggested that Ares was originally a Thracian deity, shoehorned into the Olympian pantheon, like someone crashing a dinner party and pretending to know the hosts. You can see it. He doesn't fit. Even his symbols don't evolve. No clever metaphors. No reinterpretations. Just spear, sword, shield, repeat. You find a clay tablet next, scorched at the edges. It contains a speech fragment, likely from a lost play. Ares walks not among us, but behind like a shadow with no direction, roaring at a sun that does not hear him. Woo! Someone had feelings. You step outside now, into the cool twilight near the ruins. Ares appears beside you, staring out across the valley. They never wrote the truth, he mutters. You ask what the truth is. That I didn't want to be loved, he says. I wanted to be used. He kneels and draws a crude diagram in the dirt, a city under siege, defenders falling. One figure charging alone. That moment when everyone else breaks, and I don't, that's me. You nod. It's tragic, but also limited. Because when all you are is fire, you never learn to be warm. Ares stands. I was never a hero. He brushes dust from his armor, but neither were they. Oof, you can't deny that. The other gods, full of flaws, Athena's pride, Apollo's ego, Zeus's everything. But they got better press. They got context. They got sympathy. Ares got blamed for the results everyone else helped create. You walk with him through one final corridor. There's a statue here, unlabeled, unpolished, but clearly him, not in battle pose, just standing, watching, waiting. Maybe the sculptor saw something others didn't. And maybe that's the joke of it all. Ares wasn't the god of war. He was the god of what war leaves behind. Noise, dust, silence, and the awkward way no one looks you in the eye after the shouting ends. You're walking a path that seems familiar, but slightly wrong. The stones are cracked in all the same places, but they echo differently now. The olive trees stand the same height, but they don't sway anymore. The wind is gone. The air is still. Something's missing. And then you realize, Ares, he's not ahead of you, not behind, not off to the side cracking twigs just to prove he can. For the first time in this long, dusty, awkward journey, the god of war is quiet. You follow the trail to a sunken valley where a forgotten altar sits, half swallowed by the earth. Weeds grow through the cracks in the stone. Ares's name has faded, erased by rain, wind, time, and general disinterest. You sit and wait, and eventually, he appears, but not dramatically. No booming footsteps, no sword dragging behind him like a tantrum, just a tired god in scuffed armor. His helmet under one arm, his expression unreadable. You gesture at the altar. Used to be taller, he says. You nod. They stopped praying a long time ago. I didn't even notice at first. Just thought mortals got quieter. Turns out I was fading. He doesn't say it with anger, just observation. The way someone might talk about a sunset they accidentally missed. I kept showing up. He continues. Kept yelling, kept fighting, but they weren't listening anymore. They were telling stories about smarter gods, kinder ones, funnier ones. Athena got poems. Hermes got jokes. Me, I got warnings. There's a long pause. You ask what happened. I left. Just like that. No final battle. No heroic sacrifice. No chariot of flame wheeling into the sky, just Ares, slowly realizing he was shouting into a room that had already been emptied. They didn't banish me, he adds. They just stopped inviting me. And that was the deepest cut. Because for a god who never learned subtlety, being ignored is louder than any battle cry. He drops his helmet beside the altar, lets it roll. I thought if I kept charging, they'd see me. If I kept screaming, they'd need me. But you know what happens when the war ends. He looks up at you. No one wants to sit next to the god who only knows how to burn things. And that's what it comes down to. Ares wasn't defeated. He wasn't overthrown. He was outgrown. You sit beside him as the last light fades from the sky. The clouds are soft. The air is cool. And the silence isn't hostile anymore, it's just still. Ares watches it all, like a soldier who survived a war he doesn't remember starting. And then, for the first time, he whispers, maybe I was the warning. You don't speak, because now it's time to let the noise rest. You stay there with him, under a sky washed in soft indigo and dusted with the first evening stars. The kind of sky that doesn't ask questions, just watches. The heat from the day is fading slowly from the ground. The air has cooled into something round and weightless. And Ares, god of war, breaker of tables, misfiring flirt, misunderstood sibling isn't raging anymore. He's quiet, not defeated, just done shouting for tonight. You listen to the faint rustle of leaves, the stretch of branches curling inward, the distant hum of an owl starting its night. Even the insects seem to slow their song, everything folding gently into hush. Even him, because even the loudest gods need stillness, especially them. You let your breath match the rhythm of the night longer, slower, softer, like the air itself is sighing. Like the ground is settling under your feet and saying, you're here now, and that's enough. And maybe that's all Ares ever wanted, to be allowed to exist when the world wasn't burning. So let this be the end of the story for tonight. Let the board games remain unflipped. The helmets rest in the grass. The laughter echoes somewhere out of reach. Let silence be the last act. And as your eyes grow heavier and the stars blink slowly above you, let the war god sleep beside you, uninvited, but no longer unwelcome.